What is up, everyone? Welcome back to JulioG TV. Today we got episode 5 of The Decree. Remember this, The Decree is the show where I bring you the latest from a local, national, or global standpoint with a focus on the legal aspects and the overall goal of uncovering the truth. But also, we are having our guest segment in the podcast format, and that's what we're here to do today. For our second guest today, you guys are going to be inspired. We got a lot to cover on his story, what he's currently doing. He's a good friend of mine. He's a husband. He's a father. He loves music. He loves working out. He loves sports. He's also an artist, an audio engineer, a certified personal trainer, and I also like to shout out what his brand and what he's currently doing, IAC Lifestyle, related to an apparel brand, his music, and of course, his certified personal training. IAC Lifestyle stands for Intelligence and Confidence, launched back in 2020. I'll let him tell you more about that and what he got going on with IAC Lifestyle. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Charles Mintz, aka Charlie Hustle. My
My
man.
guy. I appreciate the intro, sir. That was great.
Hey, I try to do my best. Hopefully, I did it some justice.
No, definitely did. I appreciate that for sure. What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Charlie Hustle, as he stated. IAC everything in this bitch.
Awesome. Heck yeah, man. Again, thank you for joining me. You know, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, this show is really about sharing stories, whether they're a professional, business owner, worker, for, all walks of life. We just want to get people on, share their story, help people out there be inspired, and, just keep making the world go round, as they say. And so I really appreciate you jumping on, taking the time to, share with us. And without further ado, I think, we go ahead and jump right in if you're ready, my man.
Definitely, let's do it. Let me real quick say I appreciate you having me on. As you stated in the intro, very good friends. So I appreciate the thought of you having me on and letting me share my story with hopes of inspiring some people.
Yes, sir. I definitely know you're going to do that. One of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, but of course, more importantly, we have some history of, how we met. And I think your story is, I think, how we really connected, given my background as well. I always like to say, I stole it from one of the old timers back in the day, come from humble beginnings, and so I think, that's how I felt, we had that initial connection. But all right, man, let's find out who Charles Mintz, Charlie Hustle is. If you just want to start of, where you're born and raised, where you're from, and, we'll get into it.
Sounds good. That sounds good. So, yep, Charlie Hustle. I was born and raised in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Shout out to 575. That'll always be home. Spent some time in Albuquerque, and we can discuss that, down the conversation. But born and raised in Cruces. That's home. Always will be home. Right there on Poplar and Locust. That's the old block right there. So if you know, you know.
There you go. So you grew up in New Mexico, southern New Mexico, Las Cruces. Were you born in Las Cruces?
Yep, born and raised there. I'm 39. Spent probably, damn near almost all my years. I lived as I said, Albuquerque for a few years. Lived in Arizona prior to moving back out here now for a couple years as well. But most born in Cruces. All spent most of my time there as well.
Awesome. So, uh, did you do, like elementary, middle school, high school, all that in Las Cruces as well?
Yep, all that. So I went to Oh, actually, let me shout out the first elementary I went to, Booker T. Washington. Shout out Booker T. Washington. And then I
Okay.
went to University Hills as well, University Hills Elementary, and then also went to Hill Rise Elementary as well for a year. Middle school was just Lynn, strictly Lynn Middle School. And then in high school, went to Cruces. My high school career was interesting. So, and we can touch on some of this down the road. But I went to Cruces, I went to Mayfield, and then I moved out to Sierra Vista, Arizona, which is right outside of Tucson. and I went to high school out there for a year. Shout out to Buena Colts out there in Sierra Vista as well.
There you go. Go Colts.
That's right.
uh, all right. So I guess what I would ask you on that is, who was Charles Manson? Let's start at high school. Who were you in high school? What'd you do? What type of kid were you? Growing up in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm from northern New Mexico, as you know. So I kind of get the New Mexico lifestyle, so to
Yeah,
speak. But who were you in high school? What'd you do? What type of kid were you? Just to kind of give the audience a little background there.
for sure. And and I'll go a little bit further than that. I think just to paint the whole picture, right? So yeah, I always loved sports growing up. So I played basketball, all throughout elementary school. Once I got into middle school, played football and basketball. Was always a huge music fan as well. So I'd been listening to music since I was young as well. Wrote my first song when I was 8. Corniest thing in the fucking world, but I mean that everybody's first something is going to be like that, right? You progress down the road. So played sports and all that stuff up until I was also in band. I played the trumpet in middle school. Um, and then once I got to high school, I really wanted to focus on basketball, but I didn't have the skill set to play at that level. So I ended up just joining the football team. So I played football for a couple years, and then kind of everything just kind of turned to the other direction. I'm not going to blame anybody else, you know what I mean? But got into drinking, got into skipping school, smoking, all those things, and then that's kind of the remainder of what my high school years were until I dropped out.
Got it. Got it. So sounded like you had the typical getting into sports stuff like that, and then once you got into high school, you started chatting, hanging around with some other kids, and that's how it kind of took a turn. Maybe for the younger audience out there too, I mean, looking back on it now, that you're older, still young, of course, for sure, 100%, you're still young. But looking back on it, I mean, for any of the younger audience out there, what do you think it was that made you kind of look at that fork in the road and go that way rather than maybe continuing on sports or whatever another path may have been? I mean, what do you think it was at that point? Was it just the typical high school situation and then it just kind of led you that way? Or when you look back on it, what do you think it was?
That's a great question. You know what I mean? And I think, at that age, and even a little bit even before, and this is not taking a shot at anybody in my family. I grew up in a single parent home. My father was in and out for most of our lives and passed away when I was 15. My mom was busy working, going to school. She had a lot on her plate along with the kids. So, we were bouncing around between hers and my grandma's house, my grandparents' house for a majority of the years that I can remember at least. So I think structure played a role as well. But I also think with that, we didn't have a strong support system. So, wanting to play sports, we were always the kids catching rides with, the other teammates and stuff like that. We didn't really have a support system that pushed us, to be disciplined, to be structured, all that stuff. They tell us stuff and it'd go in one ear and out the other. But I think that played a huge role in it. Obviously the neighborhood that we grew up in, it wasn't the worst neighborhood, but it was where I saw a lot of my first, gang fights, drive-bys, drugs, all that stuff was kind of that where I got into seeing all that stuff as well. And without any real structure and stuff, you kind of just start to hang out with people and, run the streets and do all that. And again, not blaming anybody, but if we're looking at the reality of it now, I'm an adult and I see it now. I feel like if I would have had structure and a better support system, um, then things may have been different. You know what I mean? Because for me, it was like, you know, my grandparents and I had some aunts that were like, you go to school, you get a degree, you get a job, you buy a house, you retire, and
Yep.
that's that. But the people I hung out with, it seemed like they were having more fun not doing that. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it
Yep.
seemed like running the streets was more fun, and there was people that balanced that. Though I had friends that were able to go to school, get good grades, play sports, go hang out on the weekends, and do well. And then I had friends that were just like me in high school that went to school during the passing periods, picked people up to go party, and didn't do anything else otherwise. I think it was a combination of the people I associated with not having very much structure, on the other side, in the home life. But also, I think me just wanting to find a place and fit in somewhere. You know what I mean? So I think when you're kind of lost in those years, like I played football,
Right.
but I wasn't the best football player. I was cool with all the jocks. I was cool with, all the nerds. I was cool with the emos and cool with the gangsters, but I was trying to find my place. And I felt like in that mix, I could associate with all of them. And I was just like planted there. So I was able to hang out with the jocks and they were cool, hang out with the gangsters and they were cool with me, hang out with, these people, and ended up just being one of those things where it was like, I'm just going to go run with the kids who are doing what I want to do, which is just party. We weren't going around causing trouble, but we
Right.
weren't focusing on schoolwork. It was more just, let's just get people to come party with us, and then that'll be what we do.
Right. Right. No, I think that's a good point. I mean, a lot of I grew up in a similar background as you just described, and I think that's true. It's really hard to do all the things that like you said, your grandparents. I was really close with my grandmother as well, so I think, like I mentioned earlier, we really connected on our stories. But I think, like you said, without that structure and people telling you to do this or that or the other, and to like you said, go to school, get a job, retire. um I think it's really difficult. Like for me, if I didn't have sports, um, I don't know if I would have, been on a worse path or what it was, because, when you go to school, you don't have to deal with everything at home. And then when you
Exactly.
go back home, you got to deal with the reality of the environment you're living in. And I
Yep.
think, that's the structure piece you were describing. When we're in school,
Yeah.
it's all fun. We're there with our friends. We're not really thinking about, going home, what's for dinner, where we're going to get our next meal, all that type of
Yep.
stuff. So I could relate to that. And I think that's great. I mean, outlook on, the youth, in terms of, we really need to have the youth in some sort of, programs, or, get their
Yep.
interests, especially when, with people like us who, have a little bit tougher environment when we have to go home. I think, having programs for the youth, things of that nature. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think that'll be very useful for everyone out there, or maybe people that are thinking about, or maybe have already made that decision, high schoolers or college students, that, maybe they could reflect and think, well, you know, uh, maybe I don't have to party every night.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. And my grandparents were good. You know what I mean? They took care of us. They did what they had to do. My mom did what she had to do. You know what I mean? It was just one of those things where, as soon as we got home from school, we just wanted to run the streets. You know what I mean? And so it was a combination of those things, but also obviously me being hard headed. And I look back now, and sometimes when you look back now, you're like, damn, I wish I would have listened. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's like, I know now. So that's my message to my kid. That's my message to, younger kids that I talk to now. It's just like, man, just go to school, listen to your parents, do what you need to do to make sure you don't end up on the same path that I ended up. You know what I mean? Because I was real hard headed too. Like I'll never blame it on anybody. My family, my
Right,
mom,
right.
my grandparents, nobody, because I was hard headed as a kid as well. But I think it was just a combination of those things, and not really, like I said, if it was one of those things where I had the structure and where most parents are there and stuff like that, then I may have not been as hard headed, or there's so many different variables. But I think at
Yeah.
the end of the day, it just comes down to making sure that there's some structure in the home, and also for myself, I guess having a purpose, right? Like at that age, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do at that age. You know what I mean? Like I never felt like I was smart enough to go be an engineer, or to go, do all these other career paths that people are taking. It took me a long time to shake that,
Right.
and to find what my purpose and my path was. But I think at that age, unless you have structure at home, you're not going to know. For the most part, I guess you could say. I don't want to say everybody, but in my case specifically, speaking for myself, not lacking things in certain areas. I didn't really know what I wanted to do or how to get there or anything like that.
Right, right. No, I think that's spot on, and I think you made a good point. We all have different paths. We all walk different shoes, and so I think the importance of sharing that is it's may not apply to everybody, but I think there's a lot of folks, especially nowadays where you have so much access as opposed to
Yeah.
when we were growing up. It's like you have 2, 3 worlds now. You have the
No,
reality,
seriously.
you have social media, you have all that stuff. So no, that makes sense, and I definitely think a lot of people find value in that. So I guess just continue on the timeline here. Once you started hanging out with that crew, so to speak, or those types of friends, um what grade did that happen in high school?
So the first time I went skipping school was freshman year. Scared out of my fucking mind that if my grandparents found out, it was a wrap. So I was like, man, this is too nerve wracking for me, because really up until the point when I felt comfortable skipping school, drinking, smoking, doing all that, I was like, nah, man, I got to be in class. Like I can't get in trouble, this and that, whatever the case
Right,
may be. But once I realized how easy it was to go skipping and not get caught and all these things, you know what I mean? Then it was just like, oh, okay, we're good. So, I want to say,
right,
the first experience was around freshman year, but it wasn't anything crazy. But really, once my sophomore year came, is when things really hit the fan, and that was when it was like, okay, we're going balls to the wall, and not that's not from like a bragging standpoint, but it's like the reality that once sophomore year hit, and we found out how easy it was to get the weed, to get the alcohol, to get off campus, then it was just a wrap. And then, like I said, at that point, it just spiraled. And I still went to class every now and again. I think that
right.
part really happened when it was junior. So sophomore year, it intensified, but junior year is when it really, really kicked in, and it was really like when I was missing class and just going for the passing period and finding ways to continue to get off campus and all that stuff.
Right, right. And so, once you got into junior year, I think you mentioned earlier you eventually stopped going to school.
So I would go during the passing periods. I went to class every now and again just because the school would call my grandparents, and the excuse was always I was there, I was just late, so they counted me absent. You know what I mean? That was always the excuse I gave.
Yeah.
And then it really went south because I was going to I was going to class one day, and I remember this so specifically. I was going to class, and I'd forgotten my notebook for that class, but it was in my friend's car. And so I'm headed back to the student parking lot to go get my notebook, and I see my counselor. Shout out to Mr.
Oh,
Romero. I could not
hey,
stand
Mr.
him during high
Romero.
school, but we're good friends now. You know what I mean? So shout out Mr. Romero. But he caught me in the hall, and he was like, "Mr. Mintz, just the person I wanted to see." And I was like, "I swear I'm going to class. I'm going to get my notebook." And he's like, "No, we're going to go to my office." And so that was the day that I found out that I was getting kicked out of Cruces High School.
Dang.
So I had an aunt that worked at Mayfield, so I was able to get in at Mayfield. But of course, my reputation followed me from one place to another. So the principal, already had his feelings about me there. So I'm at Mayfield, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna just try and do right, just lay low. So I'm taking some night classes, and I'm trying to get caught up on credits and do all these things, all the while still, missing class when I can and all that stuff. And then at that point, I realized that actually, hold on. So before, okay, because now I was leading into moving to Sierra Vista the first time. So before that happened at Cruces,
Right, right,
I had moved to Sierra Vista, and I was going to finish out. The plan was to finish out high school there, because
right,
at the time you needed less credits, and I'm like, I can't get in trouble because I don't know anybody. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way for me to fuck this up.
right, right.
So I moved to Sierra Vista, and I'm doing good. You know what I mean? I'm doing everything right. But again, as a 17-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid, hard headed, my aunt's husband and I had, gotten into it, and he was like, man, you got to go back to Cruise. It's like, this just ain't working. And I was like, all right, it is what it is. So that's when go
And
back to Cruises.
that was an AZ.
Yeah, that was an AZ. Yeah. So
Okay.
then move back, and then we get into transferring out, getting sent over to Mayfield, and so I'm doing all these, night school, all these things to get caught up on credits. Um, Still all the while partying and doing all those things, but a little more serious because I'm like, okay, I can't keep doing this the rest of my high school career. Then came to find out, like, even with taking all these night classes, like, I'm so far behind that I'm not going to graduate on time anyways. So at this point, I'm like, you know what? Call my aunt and her husband. And I'm like, can I just move back to Sierra Vista and get my GED? I'll just drop out of high school, get my GED. And she's like, you got to talk to Miguel, is my aunt's husband, my uncle's name. So I call him up and he's like, well, what's changed? And I'm like, man, I was a stubborn, hard headed kid back then. Like, I just want to go get my GED and try and change things. And he was
Right.
like, all right, if you come back, this is the rule. This is what you're going to be doing.
Right.
And so I went back, signed up for all my GED classes, got a job, did what I had to do, and then ended up moving back after I got my GED, and that was 2004. So I should have graduated in 03. That's when I went to Arizona after in 03, and then got my GED, came back in 04 to Cruces.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I think that gives a lot of insight as to, even if high school isn't the thing, I know a lot of, I have family members, friends that, had a similar path. And, I think a lot of people look at it as a, bad thing or negative thing. I know a lot of folks that, maybe opted for that route and ended up being very successful, things of that nature. So I think, that's great to see that, you still saw that education was important, whether or not you wanted to continue after that. You said, let me get this, education, let me get this diploma at least, and then see where, life takes me, so to speak. That's what it kind of sounds like you were thinking, when you made that decision. And so, once you got the GED, and what year was that again?
That was 2004.
Okay, so we're 2004. You got the GED. You're back in Cruces. What's next for Charlie Hustle?
Back in Cruces, running a fucking muck.
Oh,
Man, right,
I gotta
right,
hit him with
right
this
back.
one on that, bro.
No,
uh,
yeah, right back to the same thing. You know what I mean? Got right back in with the same crowd. And by this time I had picked up a cocaine addiction. You know what I mean? So I'll be transparent about that. So drinking, still smoking weed. Now I picked up this cocaine addiction. And then so start selling it. So now I'm
right,
I'm I'm in I'm in the game, and nothing crazy. You know what I mean? 8 balls, quarter ounce. Nothing major. Small time little guy. You know what I mean?
right,
But just doing that, and so it's like, how long is this gonna go on for? You know what I mean? And the girls at the time, she was like, man, like, you can't keep doing this. You got to stop at some point. You know what I mean? So I'm like, all right, cool.
right.
So I'm like, I'll get rid of what I got, and that'll be that. So that was kind of the
And
path that we were on. I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, and how long did you continue to ride that out? From '04. You know, how far did that take you down the road?
It was literally just for a specific time frame in 04. It wasn't like years on end. You know what I mean? We're talking like months. I couldn't even give you a time frame. It was so long ago. Like, I don't remember timestamps, but I remember,
No, no.
those specific things.
Yeah, yeah. It's been over a couple decades now, so.
Couple decades.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Okay. So then, once you made that decision, and again, I think, a good point that I'm seeing that you're highlighting here is, even though you've, go off the path here and there, I feel like, something in you, clicks and says, hey, I got to go this way, and I think that's very important for, everyone listening out there or watching out there is, you know, no matter if you make bad decisions, it's fine. You could always correct it. Doesn't matter if you fail, you could start again. And so I think that that's a great theme that you have going on there. And I think that, it's important in life, even if it's not that path, just any path, I think if you do make a bad decision, you could always correct it. And so I think that's something I just wanted to point out that, it's inspiring to see, especially, when you're walking down that path in a tough environment. It's hard to see the light sometimes, and I can relate to that. But okay, so you say, enough of that. Where does it take you next?
Man, so essentially I'm done with that, right? Like I've gotten rid of everything. And again, it wasn't like a crazy amount of product, whatever, but
Right.
get rid of what I got. And then, just hanging out with some friends. At this point, we're just drinking, doing whatever we do. So I come home one day after a night of partying, and my aunt's like, somebody's been calling for you, and they're an old friend. And
Mm,
I'm like, okay, I haven't heard from this dude in forever, but I've known him since elementary school, so let me go ahead and see what's good. So he hits me
right.
up and he's like, hey, um, I need an ounce of cocaine. Can you help me out?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I got you. Like, didn't even think twice about it. I've known this kid for a long time. Families knew each other, so don't think anything about it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
transaction happens, and then nothing. Right. So calls back again for me the next day. I'm not home, but my older brother gets involved. Same thing. Hey, I just need an ounce of cocaine. My brother's like, yeah, I got you.
Right.
Transaction happens, and then that's that. Go on about my business. Nothing happened. So I'm
Right.
working at Sears at the time. I was unloading trucks for Sears, and I called my grandpa one day, and that happened in August of 2004.
Okay.
So now we fast forward to December of 2004, and I'm working at Sears, and I call my
Uh-huh.
grandpa because I had forgotten my lunch. So I'm like, hey, can you bring my lunch? Like, I forgot it. And he's like, I can't because I got the kids. He's talking about my younger cousins. He's like,
Yeah.
but the cops came looking for you and your older brother. And I'm like, what?
Oh,
I'm like, for what? But I had just
yeah.
gotten in trouble for a minor in possession of alcohol that I was
Oh,
dealing
okay.
with at the time. So I'm like, I'm getting this handled. Like, what are they looking for me for? And he's like, oh, no, they had warrants, said something, you sold drugs to an undercover cop or something like that. And
Oh,
I'm
dang.
like, what the fuck? Like, and at that point, I'm like, there's so much going on in my head. I had no recollection of this event, right?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. So I hang up the phone, and then I call the girl that I'm with at the time, and I'm like, yo, it's a situation. And she's like, just leave. I'll go pick you up. And I'm like, nah, I can't. Like, I have to deal with whatever's coming. Like, I don't even know what's going on. As soon as I hang up the phone with
Right.
her, mall security comes in. They're like, hey, we need to see Charles Mintz over here in the office, whatever. So they take me away. I walk in. There's fucking two state cops. One of them holding the warrant up like this. Charles Mintz. So yeah, that's me. He goes, read this and make sure everything's correct. So I'm reading it and I'm looking
Right.
at it and I'm like, all right, well, my social's wrong. I think my social was wrong. Everything else looked good. And I'm reading the paperwork, the warrant. I'm like, I don't even know what was going on these days. Like, it was months ago. Like, I don't even know what's going on. And I'm like, there's nobody's
Right.
names in this document, right? Except mine, the undercover cop, and then they list vehicles, the colors of the vehicles that were involved. And I'm like, I don't even
Right.
know what any of this stuff is about. Like, I don't even know what's going on. And they're like, well, we got a warrant for you. We got to take you in. So I'm like, fuck, man. All right. So I'm this 18-year-old kid, never been to jail before. Like, felony, these are felonies, and I'll get into the actual charges here in a second. But so
Right.
they take me to the police station, do whatever they got to do, process me, and they take me to jail. And I walk into the holding cell and I see my older brother. And the first thing he says is, you know who it was, right? And I was like, and at this point I had figured it out. Like I started putting dates together, when I was getting processed and things like that. And so I'm like, yeah, I know who it was.
Right.
It was fucking so and so. And he was like, yeah, that motherfucker. And so go call my grandparents. And so my bond was 20,000 secured. My brother's was 20,000 secured. So I call and I'm like, what's going to happen? Are you guys going to get us out? And they're like, no, we don't got the money to get you guys out. Like, you're going to have to sit in there until we figure something out. And I'm like, huh?
Damn.
We got to do what?
And
And
just
so
to
at this
highlight, you're
point,
18. You're 18 at the
yeah,
time, right?
I'm 18 at this
Damn.
time. Yeah. And never been in
Okay.
jail before. So I don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? So I'm sitting there.
Right.
And then, of course, they split my brother and I up. They put us in different holding cells. So go to the holding cell and then finally get processed out, go to population. You walk in, and I tell people this all the time. Like I was, first night there, second night there. I wake up, I'm sleeping, and I have a dream. I'm with four other dudes in fucking orange suits, and I wake up, and I'm in a room with four other dudes in orange fucking suits. And so,
Oh man.
and so so all the while, like, I still don't know what's gonna happen. My bond is still 20 grand secured. Nobody has 20 grand, or collateral to fucking put up for me.
Right.
So finally get the exact paperwork from the grand jury indictment and all that. So the two charges I was looking at were trafficking a controlled substance, which in New Mexico is a first degree felony,
Right.
or second degree, first degree, second degree. I don't remember one of
I
those. I
might
think
be
it's a
second.
second
I
degree.
mean, I'm not a criminal lawyer, else I'll probably know, but
No, no, I think it
yeah.
is because the first degree is 18 years, second degree is 9 years.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was second degree felony for trafficking a controlled substance, and then conspiracy to commit trafficking a controlled substance, which is third degree felony. So that's 3 years. So I'm looking at
Yeah,
12 years.
they usually put all those together. It's like the common thing they do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and I don't know anything about the laws, and so I'm of
Yeah.
course everybody in jail is a fucking lawyer, right? So
Yeah.
everybody's in my
No
ear
half lawyer.
telling me this. Yeah. And so, come to find out, like, the conspiracy charge came from just a phone call because we conspired to commit the trafficking of the dope.
Oh, okay.
And
Yep.
then I
Yep.
found out, because I was like, I didn't even, like, I just made the transaction happen. I didn't touch anything. You know what I mean? Like,
That makes
I was
sense.
involved in that regard. So, but in New Mexico, knowing or causing the transfer makes you just as guilty as if you actually did it. So even though I didn't touch
As a crime.
anything, because I knew about it and caused it, I incidentally, committed. I was trafficking the controlled substance, right? So
Right.
a lot of people are like, you're gonna end up doing some time. Some people are like, you might get off of probation, and I'm like, well, at this point, it's like, whatever. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I got to figure out, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Right. So you were, talking about, what's next. You're in the saddle,
Right.
4 jumpsuits.
So yeah, so, it was one of those things where I'm looking at some time. I don't really know what's going to happen because my court date, because it was around Christmas time. And so, holiday season with the courts and all that, it's like a nightmare.
Oh, yep.
So didn't really have any clue what was going to happen. I don't even remember getting a court date until later on. And then when I was in there, they put another warrant out for my arrest. I'm like, yo, I'm already in here. Like,
Right.
what is going on? But so fast forward, my grandparents ended up taking out a second mortgage on their house to get us a private attorney.
Right.
So we finally get a court date. We get this private attorney.
Those damn attorneys,
Finally.
man.
So we finally go to court, get our bond reduced. Oh, and they again split me and my brother up. They didn't have us in the same pods or anything, but we were in the ones next to each other, so we could still communicate. Sending kites under the door, communicating through the door, and all that stuff. So
Right.
we go to court, get our bond reduced through the courts 10%. And at that time we had gotten it reduced to 10 grand, 10% through the court, so it was $1,000. So we get out
Right.
of jail, and then they gave us this janky ass fucking bullshit house arrest that we were on, and it was just some shit
Yeah.
they made up to keep us in the fucking house because nobody ever came to check on us. Nobody ever fucking did anything. So I think it was just some bullshit that um, my aunt and my grandparents had like told the lawyer and the judge to say, just so this way we could stay in the house and not potentially get in trouble again, right?
Right.
um,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
so then at this point, we're out on bail, right back to doing the same fucking thing. You know what I mean?
Let me interrupt you real
Like,
quick. Just 2 things I think you highlighted that are really important. Is
for sure.
sometimes you don't have to do anything physically, as even if you just facilitate something, you could get in trouble for it. So all the kids out there, young guns, even though you think you're not doing anything, the laws are tricky. So
Yep.
you got to be very careful. And I guess adults too,
Yeah.
it applies to
No, for
adults.
sure. Yeah.
So, even though you think you're not doing anything, there's a way that they could, get you essentially the way the laws are written. And then, but the follow up question would be, how long did you guys have to stay incarcerated?
So we were in for just about like a month and a half. Not too long, longer than what I would have liked to have been in jail. Let me just say
Right,
that, but it wasn't very long otherwise. And I
right,
mean, it was one of those things where you learn quickly what to do and what not to do.
Right.
And interestingly enough, I was in a pod that one of my friends was in prior to my incarceration. And so I
Mm,
had called him one day and I'm like, yeah, I'm in X pod, so and so. There's a guy so and so in here and so and so. And he's like, is there another guy in there? And then he gives me his name and I'm like, yeah. I said, a black dude, right? And he was like, yeah. He goes, tell him I said, what's up? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what y'all's relationship was like. I don't know. And so I end up telling him anyways, and he's like, "Oh shit, that's your homeboy." And I was like, "Yeah." And this dude, so everybody knows that whoever's in the longest is like the leader, the boss of the pod, right? So this
right.
dude had been in there the longest, so essentially he was the one who was in control of the pod, so to speak. So
Right.
he was like, "Oh man, if you're good with him, then you're good with me. Like, don't trip. You'll be all right." And this and that and that. So I'm like, cool, whatever. And then,
Right.
otherwise I didn't start shit with anybody anyways. Like, I'm an 18-year-old kid, never been in jail for, like, I'm not trying to get into more shit or anything like that any fucking way. You know what I mean? So for the most part, just mind
Right.
my own business. Another friend of mine ended up getting incarcerated, a dude that I had known for years in elementary school. Um, and so him and I, hung out obviously because we were good friends, and he ended up getting out shortly after I did on bail. And shout out to him because he is super successful now. One of the top barbers in New Mexico, and
Awesome.
just known in the barber world for all the stuff that he does. Um, so shout out to my dog. I don't know, it won't hurt to say his name, huh?
No, I don't think so. Shout him out. Shout him out. As
Shout
long
out
as
to
he's
my
okay
guys.
with it.
I'll double check with him.
Okay.
And I'll do it anyways though, and then you can just
Okay.
chop this up once I find out. Shout out to my guy Smitty at UGK Barbers in Cruces. Yeah, me and him, we go back. I known him since elementary school, and then we were incarcerated together. So we held each other down too as well. But now he's killing it in the barber world. Him and his lady. So
Nice.
shout out to them. Shout out to them. Another real success story right there too.
That's what we like to hear. That's what we like to hear. Turning it around, turning that ship.
For
um.
sure, for sure.
Okay, so you get out. It sounded like you may have once you got out, you're on house arrest, things of that nature. They had you on the ankle monitor, all that type of stuff, all that
No,
jazz.
that's why I say it was a janky ass house arrest because I wasn't on ankle monitors. That's why I say I
Oh,
think it was
okay.
just some shit that they made up to try and just keep us in the house.
Oh, they're saying you just couldn't
Because
leave the house.
yeah, so I think it
Oh,
was just
okay,
some
yeah, yeah.
bullshit they conspired with and made up to keep us inside the house to potentially
That
not
makes
get in
sense.
trouble or whatever.
Got it, got it, got it. Okay, yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. Okay, and then once you guys got out, what happened next?
So again, back to doing the same old thing. You know what I mean? But this time, obviously we have the private attorney, and so he's like, "Man, you need to get a job," because obviously I lost a job at Sears. He's like, "You need to get a job,
Right,
enroll in school again, so this way when we go back to court, we show the judge you're not just fucking off and doing the same thing again." So I ended
right,
up getting a job at Farley's as a cook, and then I enrolled at the community college, Doniana branch. I don't know what it's called now; they changed the name a couple times, but whatever the community college is back in Cruces. I was like, I've got this pending case, but I want to go to school for criminal justice because now I'm fucking intrigued.
right,
You know what I mean? Like, now I want to learn about this, and so ended up going for a couple semesters, and then that was in 2005. In 2005, yeah, and then so I ended up
right,
dropping out of school after like two semesters. I think it was after I went to court and got sentenced, but I ended up dropping out of school. I just Same thing with high school. Like, I just didn't really care for it too much. Didn't have any discipline. Didn't have any structure. None of that. Still was working, obviously, but
right,
otherwise, dropped out of school. And then so sentencing time comes, and by this time, our lawyer had been dealing with the prosecutor, and so of course, as they do with anybody who gets caught up, they offer you the same bullshit that they probably offered the guy who set me up was, hey, if you set somebody up, we'll drop your charges and all that stuff.
right.
I looked at my lawyer and I said, man, I'm good. And he was like, excuse me? And I said, I'm good. I said, I would rather go to prison and do my time than have to look over my shoulder every 2 seconds, worry about my family, what's going to happen, and then what's going to happen to me. And I said, on top of that, like, I got
Right.
into it, you know what I mean? Like I knew what I was doing. So it's one of those things where you own up to it, and if I gotta do the time, I gotta do the time. So of course
Right.
they ended up after that, they ended up just giving the plea bargain. So you plead guilty to the trafficking charge, a second degree felony, then we'll drop the lesser charge, which is the third degree felony, the conspiracy charge.
Right.
So we pled guilty, and my family was like, "What are you doing? Why did you plead guilty?" I said, "If I go to trial for this, like I'm fucked. They're gonna find me guilty, and then
Right.
I'm really screwed." You know what I mean? So plead guilty. Whatever happens from there happens. And so at this point, it's like chances are you're going to end up just getting probation, first offense, first time being in trouble. So we go, and we had letters
100%.
of character. We had all that stuff that we needed. So go to
Right.
court, get sentenced to 5 years probation, shit ton of fines, shit ton of community service, but still had that 9 years hanging over my head. So if I had gotten in trouble while I was on probation, they could potentially give me the remainder of the time that I had over my head,
Right.
back to being incarcerated. So that was the end result, was the 5 years probation. And man, let me tell you what, from 2005 to 2010 was the longest 5 years of my life. Probation, probation, man, it was a fucking drag.
And I think that's a good point, and I won't spend too much time on it, but I mean, having gone through that process, I mean, do you feel like it was the best thing for someone to, you know, uh, learn from that or get them back on track? I mean, do you feel like probation was just a waste of time, trying to really, just, stay however it was at the, probation's changed so much, from then
Yeah,
to now. But, you know, if I recall, around that time, probation was more of, you got to do this, this, and this, come this often. If you do, any infractions, it's potential violation, all that stuff. Do you feel like probation helped you out at all to, get you from point A to B? And if not, what do you think, would, in your opinion, looking back at it, would maybe helped you a little bit more in that transition?
man, I think it was a blessing to not get incarcerated first off, right? So, I
Right.
definitely would have taken their probation.
Right.
Um, excuse me. I want to say it was like a yes and a no, because
Mhm.
you can get away with all kinds of shit on probation. I'm gonna just leave it at that, right? So you can get away with all kinds of shit on probation, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it was like I don't want to have to deal with the consequences of a violation on my probation. But I think it
Right.
was more so me telling myself like I'm not trying to go through this shit again. You know what I mean? Like I definitely do not want to go to prison. I do not want to deal with this shit again. And so I think it was more so of I need to get myself right versus probation being the game changer for me. Like it played a role for sure. I'm not going to downplay it because,
Right.
having to check in, having to do all these things, it's like exhausting, it's tiring, it's annoying. But to a degree, it kept me on a straighter path, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, but I
So it
think it
had
was
some
just,
sort of effect, some positive effect to say that, if you went and did this, that, or the other, you might end up back in that process.
yeah, 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 for sure. But again, just mostly just telling myself like, man, I'm good on this lifestyle. You know what I mean? This ain't for me.
Right. Okay. And then, I know we've been going for a little bit, so I think I'll take a little jump for you, if that's okay. If there's anything important though that you want to mention, I'd say, please mention it. But I know I mentioned IAC lifestyle, and started in 2020. So maybe from that gap of, from 2010 to 2020, and then we could jump into IAC lifestyle. Is there anything in that gap, that you did to get you to IAC lifestyle and get you to where you are today? And then we'll talk about, what you got going on today.
For sure. Not necessarily, except that IAC came from my alcohol addiction. So it initially started off, it stood for intense alcohol consumers. We had like a little clique of friends that would just go days on end, drinking, pulling all nighters, all that. But otherwise, nothing really positive came from that time period. I'll be brief, but I got a DUI when I lived in Phoenix, so I had to do some time in Tent City for that.
Hmm.
And just working and trying to figure out what the fuck I'm doing with my life. You know what I mean? Was kind of
Right.
from there. From there, I will say up until 2018, because 2018 we moved to Albuquerque.
Right.
And then things kind of turned, some opportunities opened up. Still drinking and doing all those things, but had jobs that I probably wouldn't have had if I stayed in cruises, opportunities that came up, things like that. So there was some positivity once we got to Albuquerque. But otherwise, up until about 2020 is really when everything changed for the better.
Right. So would you describe it as, when did you pick up, the drinking and all that? Was it a little shortly after probation, or when did all that happen?
Oh, I had been drinking since I was like 14.
Okay.
It just progressively got heavier and heavier,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, and more. So like when I got the DUI in Arizona, they classify them different. So mine was an extreme DUI because I blew a .178. Um, you know, shouldn't have been driving that night, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
obviously, can't do anything about it now. But I did what I had to do to get it taken care of. So, but the
Right.
drinking was an ongoing. Drinking was, it was smoking weed at 13 and then drinking at 14, and then from there, the drinking was always the go to. Even when I had quit smoking weed, even when I had quit doing cocaine, drinking was still the go to. But once we got to
Right.
Albuquerque, like I said, I was still drinking, but opportunities came up that put us in positions that really was the game changer for everything in 2020 and moving forward.
No, I hear you there. And just to touch on that, I think it's very valuable. What led you, or how did you, I think throughout your story, you've demonstrated a lot of, self-reflection, whether you've seen, the situation you're in, and you've sat down, you've self-reflected, and I think you've been able to, see what you got to do on your own, which is a testament to you. It's really hard to do that. You got to be strong. You got to have the right mindset. You got to have all those things to be able to say, hey, I got to go this way now. And so, shout
For
out to you
sure.
for that. It's not easy to do. And I, like I said, I come from, or seen other walks of life. I've experienced that as well, and I think it's not easy to do, man. Definitely not easy to do. And so, definitely applaud you for that. And but I think, to demonstrate more of that willpower you have and that strength, what led you to say, I'm cutting alcohol as well?
So I'll preface with, I've always known, and I don't want to say right from wrong, because what's right or wrong for me may not be the same for somebody else, right? But I
Right.
look at a situation and I assess it, right? So this is when
Right.
I knew I was reaching specific levels of growth. So when I was going through my felony stuff and the dude had set me up and snitched me out, for a long time I blamed him, right? And I don't condone snitching in any way, shape, or form. I'm a firm believer in, if you're in something, you own up to it regardless of what the consequences are. Like,
Right.
that's it. You know what I mean? And so for a
Yep.
long time, I blamed him, and oh, it was his fault because he set me up and this and that. And then it was like, had I not put myself in that situation to begin with, then I never would have gotten to that point, right? So that was, I've always had
100%.
moments like that where it's like, okay, I was the one, to blame, or had I not done this to myself, whatever the case is. So when it came to the drinking, and I really wanted to try and get sober, I had tried for years. Um, 2, 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time. And so in 2020, I was
Right.
really trying to get sober again. I was working at a job at a fast food joint, and from a financial standpoint, they took care of me, right? Like, the money was good. They paid for my insurance. I was a GM, so I made my own schedule. Kind of had some free will at how things ran in the restaurant. But they also
Right.
micromanaged. I ate like shit. I didn't like the way I looked. Like, just a
Yeah.
number of other things. And so, I went sober for 6 months, and then tried to tell myself that I could drink like a six pack or maybe 8 beers and I would be good. And if you have an addiction problem or even alcoholism, one drink is never enough and one drink is too many. It's never
Right.
just the one drink. So, that six pack it'll turn into a 12 pack, and then it'll turn into an 18 pack. And I wake up the next day like, what the
Yep.
fuck am I doing? And so
Right.
tried again, tried again. I told Candace, like, I can't keep doing this, the drinking, but I also can't keep this job. Like, this job, like, I'm an addict. Suffer from alcoholism for years, but the job didn't help. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how I dealt with it, was drinking more. That's how I dealt with the job. So I said, I got to find a job that I'm happy to go to every morning, to start change the way I look at myself, change the way I feel about myself. So that's when I decided
Right.
to get back into personal training, right? So I go online to Ace Fitness, get all my manuals, and I'm like, I got to get a game plan going. So I save up some money to leave this job, start applying to gyms and stuff. Find my way into a gym. That's another story for another time. But who you know is
Right.
key, because I almost forgotten that position I got at the gym without knowing somebody. So then it's like
100%.
by this time I had quit drinking. But what I did was I had told Candace I'm gonna quit the job at the restaurant, go into personal training. I said I'm gonna get drunk one last time. Like, the only way that I know to get sober from anything is to quit cold turkey. AA never worked, counseling never worked. I quit smoking weed cold turkey. I quit cigarettes cold turkey. I quit cocaine cold turkey. I said I
Right.
need to find the willpower to quit drinking cold turkey, and I have to figure it out. So I said I'm gonna pick one night. I'm gonna get drunk, blackout drunk, get fucking wasted. And if there's anything left in the morning, I'm throwing it away and I'm pouring it down the sink. So I
Right.
do just that. I get blacked out drunk, wake up in the morning, pour out what's left, and I never look back. I started meal prepping, started going back to the gym. By this time, I already had the job at the gym lined up, so I'm working at the gym. So
Right.
changing the environment, helped. Changing my eating helped. I started reading and listening to, like the Eric Thomases, the Jim Rohns, Inky Johnsons, all those guys to help, change my mindset and my outlook on things too. And then it just trickled into a bunch of other positive things that were happening. And so I just hit 4 years sobriety in June. June 17th is the anniversary. And I will say this, at least from my experience, and if you're an addict, when you quit one thing, you have to replace it with something else. Like, the addiction doesn't just go away. You're always an addict of something, and you have to replace it with positive habits, right? You have to cut out certain things, certain people, certain places, and it
100%.
does get easier. People always say it doesn't get easier, or it's, the first however many years is hard, but it's only hard if you make it hard, because I'm not tempted to drink, any of that stuff. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say that there's days where I'm like, damn, I wonder what it'd be like to drink a beer right now, because I do have those days, but
Oh yeah.
there's nothing in me that makes me want to go drive to the bar, drive to the grocery store to go buy beer and come back, because then I think, one, I hate starting over, right? And I'm on a
Right.
4 year streak. I'd hate to have to ruin my 4 year streak for one fucking night. I'm going to buy a 12 pack and get drunk off of one beer anyways. And then it's
Yeah.
money down the drain and my streak is ruined. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
those are some of the things that I did to help get me sober. And what I've done to stay sober is just replace some of the habits with more positive things. The reading, the going to the gym, all that good stuff as well.
Right, right. No, I think and again, I just want to say, I appreciate you sharing everything you have thus far. It's not easy to, share and be vulnerable and share your story. It's especially when we know, the way I like to say to folks is, just owning up, like you said, to your
Yep.
mistakes and sharing them. So,
For
I
sure.
like sharing them personally is, other people could learn from our mistakes and hopefully they do. But I'd say congratulations, overcoming those obstacles. Myself, I haven't had a sip for about the same amount of time. So I definitely
Congratulations.
have
Yep.
those days too, where it's like, I want a beer with dinner or whatever, but and then I grab a lemonade or something and then I don't even think about it.
Yep.
So um yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think it's huge, and I'm glad that everything clicked. But I think that's a testament to you and your strength, character, all those things, man. I think it's not easy, and
For
so
sure.
we fast forward to 2020. We mentioned IAC lifestyle, so if we just want to let the audience know what that is, what you got going on, and then we take it from there.
For sure. Sorry, I thought I heard an echo. I just wanted to make sure I didn't hear no echo. Do I sound good on your end?
Oh yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so once I got my personal trainer certification, we had the name Charlie Hustle. So I was doing online training, and it was called Hustle Hard Fitness. And then IAC again stemmed from the intense alcohol consumers back in the day. But I always said, like, if I ever wanted to do anything with it as a business, whether it be fashion or whatever, no one's going to take me serious if I go to
Right.
you and you know I present this business plan and oh yeah, the name stands for intense alcohol consumers. So so I'm going through periods of growth, right? All the while, and I'm like, what are two things that I feel I have gained over the years in changing my habits and my patterns, and those two things were intelligence and confidence. Um, and it was just simple. It stuck. It sounded good. You know what I mean? And so we rolled with that. And so
Right.
if you you know if you knew me back then, you knew about Hustle Hard Fitness, and then we just kind of did away with it. And that was because I was talking to my youngest brother, and he's like, "I think you should scrap Hustle Hard Fitness, run with IAC Active Lifestyle, use that as your brand, use that to tell your story. It's more relatable, X, Y, Z." And of course, the response has been great. And so shout out to my brother Josh for that advice. But so so started off as an activewear line. You know, we did some shirts, some hoodies, stringers, all that stuff. And I got to thinking, and I was like, well, given my story, I
Right.
don't want to put myself in a box and just do activewear. Like, I wanted to be able to reach out to everybody, no matter what walk of life you are. Because you know, IAC, we're firm believers in it doesn't matter if you put yourself in a situation or if life dealt you a deck of cards that was shitty. How you bounce back is more important, right? Um, and then so we
Right.
started moving to streetwear and like joggers and hoodies and stuff like that as well. And so we just kind of kept that theme, and have ran with that for a while. And then you know fast forward now, we ran with it for a couple years. Fast forward now, we're in 2024. We've been in Arizona and Phoenix for 2 years now. Went got out of restaurants, went back to school for audio engineering. And then so I'm like, man, why not keep the IAC theme with that as well? So now we have IAC sounds. So all my music, the songwriting, the engineering stuff is all with IAC sounds. And then Candace, of course, she went to school for makeup and she's self-taught to do nails. So she's like, hey, I want to do something with this. So cool. Now we got her set up with IAC Beauty. Um, you can
Nice.
see the
Nice. That's
backdrop.
awesome.
All the logos are incorporated somehow with the IAC theme. And so when people see, what I call the strand right here, or when they see the IAC one right here, whether it be the sounds, whether it be the podcast logo, Candace's beauty logo, whatever logo it is, you're gonna recognize this. That's how we wanted to keep it, because we wanted it to be as recognizable as the check. When you see the check, you think of Nike. Three stripes, you think of Adidas. You know what I mean? So we want it to be recognizable in that regard. So this way, if somebody sees this or if somebody sees this, they know it's IAC.
Right, right. And so intelligence and confidence is what IAC stands for. It's lifestyle brand. So you're keeping up with with the apparel side of it. You know, you have products coming out. I think you just dropped some products. I think the hat you're wearing there
Yes,
looks good.
indeed.
By the way, I need to get me one.
Appreciate
Um,
that.
uh, so on the apparel brand, where could they find it? And where could they go check out? You know, where to get some apparel, man.
So on Instagram is at IAC_lifestyle, but it's with a Y. So it's LYFESTYLE. The website is www.iacactivelife, again with the Y.com. That's where you can find everything. We still got, some stock on women's joggers, leggings, a few select hoodies. The drop that we just did is the snapback. So this is our Rep Your State collection. So obviously we got the strand here, and then they can customize with whatever state they're from. I'm from New Mexico, so I rep New Mexico. And then on the other side, it has the state's nickname. So this one says Land of Enchantment. But
That's sick.
we got a majority of the states up now. We're working on getting all 50 at some point. I just don't know anybody in like Montana or South Dakota, so that's why I don't have those ones up yet. But major states: Cali, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Louisiana, New York, Florida, some of the bigger states that
Right.
are whatever in that regard. We have them up, but that's where you can find all that stuff there.
Yeah, guys, go check it out. I personally have a few of those the OG lines, I like to say.
Yeah.
But I definitely like
Yes,
that hat. I'm
sir.
gonna have to get me the Land of Enchantment hat for sure.
I
I'm
appreciate that. Yes, sir.
I definitely like all the New Mexico stuff. You know how it is out here.
Got to represent.
Um, yes, sir. So yeah, guys, check that out. We'll definitely put all the links in the description below. And then also, I do want to, spend a little bit of time on the IAC sounds. So, guys, and just to give you a shout out real quick, is the intro that you guys heard was produced um, by Charles here with IAC Sounds, and so the intro music you hear, he specifically created that for JulioG TV. So again, I appreciate you doing that for us.
Man, my
It's
pleasure.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm sure we're gonna get plenty more sounds going here on the channel and for other things. But shout out there. And how'd you get going in being an artist, being an audio engineer? What led you in that way? I think I know the connection from what you mentioned earlier, but I want to touch on that because I think you've been focusing on that quite a bit. So what's IAC Sounds? How'd you get there? And then what do you got going on?
For sure, for sure. Yeah. So music has always been a huge part of my life. As I mentioned earlier, I wrote my first song when I was 8. And as corny as it was, you know what I mean, it kind of just opened up the floodgates. I would write songs with my younger siblings, and I would arrange them. And you're gonna sing this part, I'm gonna sing this part, you're gonna do this. But again, never really had any like push or drive or structure to continue to do it. My father was also in radio growing up, so he would send us tapes of his radio show where he'd shout us out and he'd play songs that he'd dedicate to us and all that. So my
That's
grandparents
awesome.
had their record players, you know what I mean? My uncle had cassettes and CDs. And so I've always been around music and stuff like that too. And my mom's a published author, so writing has always been like a huge thing in my life. Even in school, like I could never, I always had trouble in math. I could never really lock down math, but English, creative writing, language arts, all those classes, you know what I mean? I always did well in. So it was always just a huge thing for me. And I've always written on and off, right? Never really took it serious. When I
Right.
got out here in 2011, I kind of got into a little bit more, started recording. I did my actual first show back in 2011. And then when I moved back to New Mexico, kind of just, fell by the wayside again. And then again, still here and there would write every now and again. I, jot some bars down on my notebook and my phone, whatever, but never really
Right.
gave it a second thought. Restaurants really was my life at this point, you know what I mean? And then once I got into personal training, obviously that was a huge thing. So fast forward, we move out here and I'm still in restaurants. And I tell Candace, I had heard of the auto engineering school that's out here when I lived here before. I
Right.
applied, I got in, but never took the leap because, I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm still drinking, partying. Like, am I ready for this? What if I fail? All these things, you know what I mean? So
Right.
never followed through. So this time, I'm like, okay, cool. The school's out here. Let me just hit them up, see what they got going on. So we do a tour of the school, and I'm like, man, I really want to get back into this. So I tell Candace, I'm like, I got to do it. Like, I got to take one last shot. You know what I mean? And she's like, go for it. Like, do what you got to do. I'll hold things down where I need to hold things down. So I picked the start date and
Shout
I'm
out,
busting
Candace.
my butt. Shout out Candace, that's right. And so I'm busting my butt at the restaurant because after loans and grants, I still had to pay some out of pocket. So I'm busting my butt to get money saved up to pay out of pocket. So all the while doing all that stuff. And then
Right.
school starts, and then I take like a month off from work, and Candace is holding me down. I had a little part time gig. I'm working, some part time hours while going to school. And then I'm like, I got to get back in the workforce. Like, I can't, it's just not sustainable. So I'm working full time, going to school full time. Candace still holding down what she can. I'm doing what I can. And so I kind of just started getting back into the swing of things. I start, networking with people, via Instagram, trying to go out to stuff and events where I can and network with people.
Right.
Um, and so that's where the IAC sounds came from. Was I wanted to keep with the theme of IAC, obviously, to be recognizable in that regard. But also I wanted to have it separate from the apparel and kind of give people who want my audio engineering services, production services, whatever they may need, to be able to have them separate from the apparel. So that's where IAC sounds came from. And I'm not a producer by any means. Like the beat that I made for you, you know, I appreciate you reaching out because producing is not my thing. But, if it's a
Right.
small 20, 30-second loop, I got you. You know what I mean? Podcast style music, I got you.
Yes,
So shout
sir.
out to the producers who really produce full on beats. But But
Right.
that's something that I like to do. It helps tap into the creative juices. Obviously, writing, I've got some songs out, and I can't sing, but I sing the fuck out of the songs I got. But my hope with most of them is that somebody else hears them and it's like, wow, this is a good song. Let's get it into the hands of somebody else who may have like a better following, bigger name, and do that,
Right.
right? But I just love the art of creating, writing, and all that stuff. And I didn't even know about engineering until going to school. Like I didn't know it was a whole process of making music. And anytime I record before with other people, I'd be like, yeah, just send it to me. Whenever you leave the studio, and they're like, I'm not, the track's not done. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, we got to go back and clean it up and engineer it. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I just recorded all my stuff. Just send it to me. We're good. And they're like, no, it's not how it works. Like, you have to go back and engineer it and make it sound good. And then once I
Right.
got into school, then I was like, oh, this is how it works. This is the process for it. And it's a whole nother process. But I love it. You know what I mean? I've been doing it for about a year. So, like, I mean, obviously during school, but since I've been out of school for a year now, and still got some work to do, forever learning, you know what I mean, forever a student, but I do offer those services as well. And I tell the artists that approach me about it, first one's free. If you like it, use it. If you don't, no harm, no foul. Just provide some constructive criticism, some feedback, and I'll keep on
Right.
doing what I got to do to get better. But I'm working with an artist now, and I've sent him a couple rough versions of what I've done, and he's happy with where they're going. So we got some plans to continue working together, come in
Awesome.
results. Um, and that's kind of where we're at with IAC, just trying to build that brand as well, and provide value to what artists got going on already.
Right. Right. And so, um, you went to school, you learned more about, audio engineering. It sounds like, like you said, music's always been a part of you, the creative writing part. So are you focusing now more on like songwriting, things like that? Then you kind of maybe cut it with you yourself, and then maybe in hopes that you'll have sing or songwrite for some, or not sing, but write songs or lyrics or what it may be for, other larger artists. Is that kind of the niche in the industry you're going for, or kind of what is your main focus now? It sounds like you like writing, you have the background with your mom, all that type of stuff. But then it sounds like you also like just music overall. But what's your niche, so to speak? Just if anyone's listening out there, if they needed this type of service, I think you touched on it a little bit, and they wanted to reach out. What's your niche in that area?
For sure, for sure. So, there's songs obviously that are more personal to me. Like I wrote a song for Candace. So obviously I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect anybody to fucking come along and, take that one. But I do have other songs,
Hey,
some
you never
country
know.
songs. Yeah, you never know. But I do got some country songs that I wrote and sang.
Hey.
Um, again, I can't sing, but the hope is that somebody hears it and is like, dang, this is decent. Let's try and do something with it. I just dropped my latest single called "Shoulda Known." So I wrote that song, arranged it, melodies, all that. But again, I can't sing, so I sent it to a good friend of mine, Buffy Blue. Buffy Blue sang on it, completely murdered it. Oh my gosh, such an
Nice.
amazing job. Such an amazing job with it. So you can find that everywhere: Apple Music, Spotify, all that. It's on my website, iacsounds.com as well. And
We'll
even with
definitely
that
link
one too,
those.
like it's a little more personal. But if somebody did hear it and wanted to try and do something with it, that's cool too. So that's kind of the route that I'd like to go with some of those songs. Obviously, I have my own personal ones too, but I just love writing. I love being around other artists and kind of just seeing what we can come up with and just getting the creative juices flowing. But engineering is pretty much where my main focus is right now. Like I really want to hone in and get better at that craft, and really push that. But it all ties in together. You know what I mean, right? Like
Right.
I could be in the studio writing a song with somebody and then engineer it myself too. You know what I mean? So it's all encompassing in that regard. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at with that is there as well.
Got it. Got it. And then just for anyone listening, if you could just give us a quick breakdown of, what does audio engineering encompass, just from a general standpoint. I know we could probably have a whole nother podcast about it.
No, for
But
sure.
just for anyone listening out there, you're writing, you're doing audio engineering, kind of what does that encompass?
So the audio engineering portion is recording, obviously the vocals, the instruments, and
Right.
then and depending on like so we can go into this whole thing, but obviously you have like things like auto tune and reverb and delays, And so, in the engineering portion, you're also dealing with that, you know what I mean, and making the song sound how it should, cutting out
Right.
what doesn't need to be there, changing levels to make it fit in right with the beat. All those things, and the mastering portion is the end of it, and that's kind of where you tighten everything up, and that's a whole nother process as well. But it's really just, no song is radio ready. Like, the songs you hear on the radio are never recorded like that. You have to go back in after and get them right. You know what I mean? And it can take, and good engineers can get it done quick, right? You
Right.
know what I mean? But some, for me, like, depending on time, I like to take my time with it a little bit. So it'll take me a little bit longer. Also, still learning too, right? But there's some,
Right.
I know some engineers that can get in, knock it out, but the songs you hear on the radio are never done, almost recorded just like that. So it's a whole process of fine tuning, putting things where they need to be, changing levels, changing pitches, doing all these other things as well.
Got it. Got it. So it's more of, you have all these components, of the music, and then you, as the audio engineer, you make sure everything's kind of working together. Everything's, like you said, there might be something here that you need to adjust, take out, but you're kind of getting close to, the final product to get it there with audio engineering. Would that be a good summation, so to speak?
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, the mixing and mastering is pretty much the final phase. There's rough mixes there, all that stuff, but essentially, once you're mixing the song, you're just getting it closer to being radio ready or release ready, whatever you want to call it. And then mastering again is the final process, and that's where you just go in. Pretty much, you just tighten everything up, make sure it sits right, the vocals and stuff sit right in the beat and all like that. So.
Got it. Got it. Well, I think, I think the audience today got to know Charlie Hustle a little bit, what you're doing. Of course, I'll link everything down below. Of course, I know you're gonna do big things. So everyone
I
listening
appreciate
out
that.
there, if you need someone to write, he has the background. He's been doing it for as long as he could remember, and he's
Yes,
definitely. I
indeed.
could tell you. I could tell you. I know him. I know him personally, and I could tell you once he sets his mind to something, he's gonna get it done. And so I could definitely. I know we'll be hearing your name here soon. So if you guys haven't
I
heard of him,
appreciate that.
yeah, if you haven't heard of him, you've heard of him now. You best keep your eyes out because he's going to be climbing these ranks.
That's love. That's love. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I think there's just one little, uh, one final shout out. You also have a IAC lifestyle podcast as well that you're sharing guests, things of that nature. Where could where could they find you on that? Assuming YouTube, any other platforms?
Just for now, it's on YouTube.
Okay.
IAC everything is what it's under, and then of course the logo there. So we got the podcast. So yeah, same thing with you. What you're doing as far as trying to bring guests on who can provide some value, right? So we've got
Right.
my business attorney on there. We've got some student athletes. We've got some other business owners too. Some local artists, that kind of detail their upbringing as well, just to provide some value and stuff in that way. But that's on YouTube for now. That's probably where it'll really be until we decide to move it somewhere else. But also, real quick, want to shout out Candace and IAC Beauty, her makeup and her nails. So if you need makeup or nails done, IAC Beauty on Instagram, she'll get you right.
And you're in Arizona, correct? Just so everyone listening out there, he's in AZ.
We are in AZ, but so obviously, apparel we can ship. The
Right.
podcast we can do, how we're doing it, video streaming. Audio
Right.
engineering, we can send files and all that stuff via email. I have other means of collaborating as well. And then for Candice and IEC Beauty, so makeup, obviously we're in Arizona, but for the nails, she can make the nails, like, do the press-ons and then ship them to you with instructions and the care supplies as well. So even if you're out of state, she can still make sure your nails look good.
Oh, okay. Okay. I guess something us men don't really know too much
Yeah,
about. So I'm glad you mentioned
yeah,
that.
no, for sure. Because even me,
Uh,
I'm like, how do you make sure the nails fit? But she has this method where she gets a picture of their nails and she sizes it up, and she hasn't had any trouble yet. I think thumbs is like the only one that gives her any grief, but
yeah,
otherwise, like all her stuff, all her clients have been on point. So she's killing it,
man, that's pretty impressive. Actually, now that you mentioned that,
right?
you can be so accurate with that. So that's pretty impressive. Okay, well, there you have it, guys. Charles Mintz, aka Charlie Hustle.
We in here.
Again, I appreciate you for sharing. It's not easy to share. And I just want to, close it out with some, just a couple words and say, it's, with you sharing is, I hope everyone out there got some value from it and was also inspired, whether you were on that path, took that path, or have a similar path. Life is life. We make our decisions. Important thing is that we learn from them. If we fail, important thing is that we never quit and we just keep on moving forward. And you have a living testament right before you, right here with Charles Mintz. Like I said, I know he's going to be doing big things. So if you haven't heard him, you heard him here now. And so again, thank you, Charles. I really appreciate it, man. I appreciate our friendship. And I'm assuming next time we'll be doing this, man, you might be already climbing the rank. You might be in stardom, man. So just please remember me, man.
No, man, I appreciate you for having me. Definitely, a good time, and always willing to share my story with hosts that somebody finds value and can relate to it in some way, shape, or form. I'm a firm believer in trying to just adapt and overcome whatever life throws your way. You just got to maneuver past it and keep on going. So I appreciate you having me and letting me share my story. Um, but no, yeah, appreciate the friendship. We go back and I always tell everybody, if you're locked in with me, now you're locked in for life. So
Yes,
when I
sir.
come up, you come up. Like just like I say in my song Cash, when I say when I eat, all my niggas eat. You know what I mean? So so so,
I
so
like it. I
that's
like it.
how it goes. That's how it goes.
Well, you always got a chair at my table, brother.
I appreciate that. Feelings mutual.
All right, guys, there you have it. Again, Charles Mintz, aka Charlie Hustle. We'll have a lot more guests coming up, guys. And as always, I appreciate you watching JulioG TV. Please like and subscribe. If you keep supporting JulioG TV, we'll keep growing. And so again, thank you guys, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.